Welcome, everyone. This is Stoicon-X Orlando 2021. I'm happy to present this event to you this year. This is our second annual event. We have 3 speakers plus myself. And as of this morning, we had 96 RSVPs, and people are still entering the room. This is great. I'm going to give a brief introduction for just a few minutes, and then Brittany will be our first speaker. She's going to get started at 1:15. I'm going to give you an overview of the modern Stoicism movement for those who perhaps are a little bit new to learning Stoicism. There is so much going on, it would be hard to summarize the entire movement on just a few slides. But basically, some people believe that the latest movement began in 1998 with a book by Lawrence Becker. It was called A New Stoicism. And it kind of got the interest started again after a long period. However, the official beginning of the modern Stoicism movement was in 2012 when Christopher Gill in England began a small informal gathering among students there who were studying philosophy at his school. And then the years that followed that group began to grow year after year. The overall goal of the movement is to bring Stoicism to the public, of course, in the form of new books, presentations and talks, and of course, social media. They're also doing a very difficult job, I must say, is in modernizing the ancient works, that is translating them into modern language. And also the scholars are writing new works, which is very important because that reframes things using modern lingo and also terms from Buddhism, psychology, and other areas. And that was helping us relate better to the material. The team, as listed on the Modern Stoicism site, as well as other people, you'll recognize some of these names here, starting with Christopher Gill, John Sellers, Donald Robertson, Massimo Pigliucci, who's in New York City, Tim Laban, who's into the analytics part of that. There are 2 Gregs involved in the movement, Greg Lopez and Greg Sadler, Brittany Palat, Eve Riches, and Phil Yanov. Those are some of the big names. The annual conferences have been going on, as I said, since that small conference in 2012. But the recent conferences were very interesting because they were in different cities. In 2017, the annual Stoicon conference was in Toronto, Canada. That was also the first one that I attended. In 2018, it was in London, and there we were hosted by John Sellers. That was a great list of speeches and great events going on in and around the university there in London. In 2019, the event moved to Athens, Greece, which I thought was a real treat because we got to see some of the ancient sites which are associated with Greek and Roman philosophy. And then during the pandemic, of course, in 2020 and 21, we were online. I know that there was some last minute decisions there sometimes of, can we have it at a city or not? But I think for safety reasons and for pandemic reasons, we didn't even know if people could cross the international borders sometimes, so we had to do that online. Now, also, I want to highlight that in this year, 2021, the list of StoiconX events is growing. We're in a lot of different cities around the world. There are 12 of them total, from Paris to Moscow, and of course, our event here in Orlando. And I want to highlight that this year was also the first year where we had a StoiconX Women event. It was named Practical Paths to Flourishing, and that was organized by Brittany, one of our speakers today, as well as Catherine Coral Milanis. who is in Scotland, I believe. And so they organized a great event, so many different perspectives, and of course, adding the female voice to our learning of philosophy. That's very important. The schedule today, as I said, we're going to stick to this very closely. Each of the speakers that you see there on the screen are going to have a half an hour to present, and followed by 15 minutes of Q&A, and we're going to wrap up promptly at 4:15. So unlike some other long Zoom events that take all day, I wanted to keep this event as a half-day event, or just 3 hours and some. Okay, what are the basics of Stoicism? Again, for those of you in the audience who might be beginners, philosophy is like a doctor, but it's more like a self-examination. You're there to improve parts of your life. You're going to maybe experience some discomfort because making changes in your life is difficult. But this is one of the metaphors of visiting a doctor, or a medical type metaphor is something that is used through the Stoic texts. There are so many different tools that we can talk about with Stoicism. I'm just going to highlight a few of them that have impacted other people over the years. They first and foremost talk about how Stoicism has helped them manage stress and anger in their lives. And it's not just about repeating to yourself, I'm going to calm down. It's much more than that. They're tools that help us get through so many different events with different techniques, like taking a break or breaking things into pieces, or, as Marcus Aurelius sometimes says, look at things very objectively, and then you won't have such a bad impression about things. Overcoming obstacles is talked about very much. It's almost a part of the what brings people to Stoicism in the first place. Sometimes they've heard, wow, those Stoics, they get over obstacles very well. But of course, if you practice a lot of the tools in Stoicism, then you'll be able to use reason and rationale more in your thinking. And that, of course, is what helps you get through those obstacles and to see them more objectively. Using skepticism is, of course, a general thing in society. I think people have become skeptical of a lot of things, but when a Stoic uses it, of course, it's to protect their mind and to protect their thoughts, to guide themselves in more of a rational direction, and not believe everything you hear. Now, of course, when these things were written about skepticism 2,000 years ago, they did not have Twitter. But today we have a lot of social media that is bringing us misinformation or just opinion from other people. So more than ever, we need skepticism in our lives. And the dichotomy of control. It's kind of a tricky term there, you know, a name that you may not be able to remember so easily, but it basically comes down to what's in your control and what is not. In the modern era, some of the scholars may use the term trichotomy of control, but not all the scholars believe that. I think Massimo Pigliucci has his doubts about trichotomy of control. But as my friend Bobby used to tell me, if something is partially in your control, it's ultimately not in your control. This has become very much present in the pandemic the last year or two. We've realized that, for example, our health, we can take great care of ourselves. We can eat right and exercise right, and yet we can still get sick. So that's a good example of something that is partially in your control. And of course, for those of you who are here who might be Buddhists, you're going to hear a lot of commonalities between Stoicism and Buddhism. Moderation, or the middle way, is probably the most often heard comparison. There's also, of course, these other items I'm going to share with you: avoiding excesses and extremes. This, of course, in Buddhism is one of the major paths to suffering. So if we can avoid these excesses and extremes, That's one way to heal up our lives. Refraining from judgment and seeking no self is another area that you can compare Stoicism to Buddhism. Expectations and attachments. This is something that we will be talking about a lot, perhaps in terms of our consumerist society, our superficial society. We easily form attachments with things that appeal to us visually. And finally, meditation, focus, and compassion. These are other areas that I like to discuss in our Friday meetings at the Orlando Stoics. But there's so much to each of these, we can't really, I'm not going to cover it in the introduction. I'm nearly ready to wrap up here and turn over the podium to Brittany. But I did want to cover these common areas very quickly. These are some of the ancient Stoics that you may have heard over time. The first three come from the Greek period, and the second three are from the Roman period. Zeno, of course, is the founder of Stoicism. Cleanthes was the second leader of the school. Chrysippus was the third leader of the school and quite prolific in writing. He had over 700 volumes or books that he wrote, but unfortunately they're all lost in history. And the second group, Seneca the Younger, is famous for writing letters from a Stoic. Epictetus the slave, famous for his Enchiridion, written down by his student Arrian. And Marcus Aurelius, the good emperor, famous for Meditations, what he originally wrote as his own introspective diary. And here are the modern Stoics. I've just included some of the pictures that I could gather off of the internet. These people are doing great work. They're writing blogs. They are giving new concepts to the modern era, and they're writing new books. So a lot of these faces are people to watch in the future. All right, so I've finished my introduction on time. I'm going to pause for a moment.